a
Hey, good morning, everybody.
Good morning, Laurie.
Here's Laurie, thank you. We're just going to have a quick breeze through town before we head over to Borough. I'm not going to say much about Borough because we're going to get a guided tour while we're there. Has anybody noticed how the dry desert air makes their hands shrink?
Yes. Oh, yes. How they're what? They're all into this. Yes. There's a massage place. You know it now. Look at all these big buildings. There was money in this town.
There was. And it's sad to see that there's so many shops closed.
Alright, that was the main street of Peterborough, actually. Quite a cute little town. I love all the old buildings. Yeah.
a bustling borough.
So we went straight on here. We ended up on the Riverland and Canadian Lane on our way over to New South Wales, heading
So there's a lot to see here in Borough, so I'll have to speak very fast to let you know everything. So before we get started on the official part of the tour, I'd just like to acknowledge that we are on Winery Road, traditional owners of this area here, and we pay our respects to the traditional owners in the past, the present, and in the future. So this is Borough. Are you all from South Australia? No. So South Australia was settled in 1836, and during those first years, they started sending explorers and people further up north from Adelaide to find out what kind of resources there were here and what they could use this area for. So down to the end, and then to the left, and then to the right by the BP station. To the left and straight to the right. So very soon the glaciers, the farming settlers started sending their shepherds up further up north with their animals, their sheep and their cattle to graze. These shepherds of course knew the area very well after just a few weeks, and one day one shepherd came across something very unusual. He saw a bright green rock on top of the hill. It was so unusual that he thought he could probably make a bit of money on it. He met one of his fellow shepherds and said to him, "Guess what? I see what I found." And the other shepherd said, "I actually found one just like it." So they both had these bright green rocks. I've actually got one I can show you. You can see from a distance what it looks like. So not strange that they immediately thought that this was something special. So one of them put some of those pieces in his pocket, went into Adelaide and contacted the South Australian Mining Association, a newly formed company that were looking at places to buy to open up mines. So they could see that this looked quite profitable, and bought 20,000 acres of land from the Crown in this area to start their mining expenditure. That led to the establishment of the Borough Mine. Down here, we turn to the left, Laurie, please. So all these investors of the mine were all people who had recently come in from England themselves, and they knew that the best miners in the world in their eyes were the Cornish miners. The Cornish had been mining copper and tin for generations, hundreds of years, and they were quite the expertise. It also happened that in Cornwall, some mines had closed down during that specific time, the 1850s, and they were actually looking for new work. So many of these people were quite keen to come out to this place. They, of course, to the left here, had no idea what it was. It was a place called Australia. But back in those days, we could not go to the library and look at what Australia was or use social media. So it would have been something completely unknown to them. But they jumped on the boat and sailed down to Port Adelaide and then walked up from Port Adelaide to here with their families. So one of the big differences between South Australian settlement and settlement in other states in Australia is that it was preferred to have instant communities, built instant communities. So single people were not decided, but families. So most of the pioneers that came out actually came with their wives and 5, 6 children, and they all walked up here. Just look at those cars here. So they walked up here, and they had been promised that once they came up to Borough, the mining company would make sure that there were cottages for everyone to get into. Unfortunately, you can't always trust your employer. They don't always give you what they have promised, and it turned out that only 50% of the miner families got a cottage to live in. The other half had to find a plan B, and luckily these miners were quite resourceful people, and they had their pickaxes and their shovels, and they came down here to the creek where the soil is soft. Everywhere else in Borough, very rocky ground, very, very hard surface. But down here by the creek, the soil was soft and you could actually dig. So they got themselves these little caves into the side of the creek, and that became their home for about 5 years. These were all along the creek, went through town, out on the other side, down towards the mine, which we're going to see later. So it's estimated that there were around about 1,800 people living here in 1850. It was good in the sense that it was dry and it would have been quite cool in summer, being in there. But it is a creek, and sometimes the water in creeks will rise. So we would have had permanent water here, because water was pumped out from the mine and into the creek, and it would then run through here. But it was tolerable, just on an ordinary everyday level. But when we had big rainfalls, which we still see today, big downpours, the water would rise and get into the dugouts. Every time that happened, they just got on with business and moved on, and things started getting as they did before. But in 1851, there was a very, very big flood, and everybody was actually flooded out. One man passed away down trying to rescue his belongings, and other people lost everything. Yes. So these dugouts are part of our self-guided museum tour. You will need a key to get access. You will need to go to the Visitor Information Centre and pay an extra fee. They will lend you a key, and then you can get in there. So yes, you can go in there, but pay an extra fee first. First of all, we need money to maintain these places, and it's an insurance thing too. We can't just leave them open and have people going through. We have to prevent vandalism, and we have to make sure that we know who's in there for insurance purposes. So yes, so that big flood in 1851 meant that nobody lived here anymore, because the investors had so much opposition from other people in Adelaide, all the important people, that this was not tolerable, that this was not acceptable to let people live in a mud hut, basically. So they started building lots of new cottages, and everybody got a cottage from then on. If you go up to the little side road, close to there, yes, the first add that these dockets, we've got these two here and two under the road. They are reconstructed, so they have collapsed quite a few times, and every time they are rebuilt. So they're not original, they are authentic. They are built according to what they would have been, but they are reconstructed. Here was owned by the mining company, so the mining association bought 20,000 acres, and they built up the whole town. It was just a bit slow when we get just before the drill. Have a quick look into your left. So there's a quite abandoned cottage in there, very, very sad, up here in the corner. What I'd like you to look at is the roof. So you can see here the wooden shingles, the roof tiles. So that was how all cottages used to be. The used to be, I don't know how it was away. So all roofs had the wooden shingles. But when in later years, and also when we do restoration now, we choose the corrugated iron for various reasons. First of all, it's easier to maintain. It's a lot cheaper as well, and it's a bit hard to get rid generally. I'm not sure who owns that one there, but many of the heritage buildings are privately owned. And when building is privately owned, we can't force them to restore or maintain. So unfortunately, some do deteriorate. But yeah, this needs attention very, very soon. Once the roof is gone, then the stonework starts deteriorating as well. So just up there, so all of Barra is heritage listed. So yes, some buildings have individual heritage listing, but the whole town is heritage listed as well. That means that there are very strict rules in regards to how you maintain, restore your buildings, which is again makes it more expensive, and some people are then reluctant to put that money into their repairs. On our right-hand side, you see the square cottages. They are original miners' cottages. So I said that when the dugouts were flooded in 1851, they built more cottages, so they added to this complex here. There are now 33 cottages in all. Crossing the creek again, so this is the part of the creek that still has water in it. Go to the right of the rotunda, or basically where we came from. So the whole township here, which was actually named Corinda back in the old days, was owned by the mining company. They had all the buildings built and then invited shopkeepers in to run their businesses. The Bar Hotel was originally called the Lord's Hotel. That's one of the oldest hotels in Barra. And we've got the little fire station on your right-hand side. That was built in 1922 to house the newly purchased fire engine, and the original Ford Model T fire engine with wooden floorboards. So both of those have turned 100 years this year. On our left-hand side, we've got the art gallery, which was the telegraph station. That is now the art gallery. St. Joseph's Church on your left-hand side, beautiful church. And then the tiny little building here between the two churches, that was Mr. White's school. So back in those days, there were no public schooling, so education or schooling was not compulsory, but there were a few people who ran their own little private schools from different places in town, and that was Mr. White in there. So we are now, have already entered the area of the mine site. So you've got your mine site in to the left. If you look straight ahead, you see Peacock's Chimney. So Peacock's Chimney was originally in the middle of the mine site. From the early years, 1845, it was all underground mining, so shafts and tunnels. In 1869, because the high quality copper deposits started sort of diminishing and they didn't see the same profits, they started doing open cutting just with manual methods. And of course that meant that some buildings had to go. We're going to the left here after the chimney. The mine closed in 1877 and was then vacant for quite a few years. In 1971, a modern mining company took out a 10-year lease for extraction of low-grade copper. They then had to demolish even more buildings at the mine site, and Peacock's engine house with the chimney had to be dynamited. National just went in the last minute, took down the chimney stone by stone, numbered them all, and put it up again here by the side of the road as an entrance to the mine. So in those years from 1870 to 1877, when they did the open cutting with manual methods, that was with the shovel, the pickaxe, and horse-drawn scoops, taking the soil to one side. Very, very hard labour. They did, however, make quite a big hit at the site. They dug down to a level of about 45 metres. I know that because the water table here is 40 metres below the surface, and from pictures that we can see from the early 1900s, we can see that people use this place as a swimming pool. People would be walking around to their knees in water straight up to the top of the hill. After the modern open cutting in 1971 and ending in 1981, they left the mine pool as we see it now. So they went down to a depth of 100 metres because the water table is round up to the top there. Yeah, because the water table is the 40 metres below the surface, that means that we've got round about 50 metres deep water now. And very lucky for us, we've got beautiful sunshine, so we should get a really good view. So we can see from the sharp edges of the terracing that has been done by machines. In the distance, just straight across from us, we see this 3-storey building. That's Morfett's engine house. So because of the water table being the water level being so close to the surface, when they dug those shafts and tunnels 180 metres down, they very quickly, halfway down, they would get to the water table and water started flooding in. So they needed to pump out the water to continue mining. They brought in the Cornish pump houses from the mines in Cornwall, and we always had 3 here. I think we should go outside and have a good photo. So I'll just keep talking and you can start walking. So from the pump houses, they had big steam engine pumps that pumped water out continuously from underground, then let the water into reservoirs and let it through launders and down through the water wheels. Whenever they needed energy for flushing or other purposes, they would use the energy from the water wheels, so a good use of the water that was pumped out. Eventually, the water would be led down the hill into the creek, and from there it would run through town and down to the dugouts. So that was why I said there were always water in that creek. On top of the hill, straight across from us over there, funny little structure, that is the powder magazine. That was where they kept the gunpowder. for blasting out shaft and tunnel. Morpus engine house is from 1858. Powder magazine is from 1856 and is the oldest powder magazine in Australia. Morpus engine house, the Cornish pump house, had a big restoration in 1986, the 150-year centenary for European settlement in South Australia. That is the only restored Cornish pump house outside of here.
Everywhere you look. Don't move to your right yet, Nan.
Okay.
Oh, that's lovely.
Yeah.
What they were storing up, that was where your sand was, so they would bring in the rock. We actually had a big mining conference happening here next week, so that's how important our mine is. The Australasian mining conference.
I've put it out there. Well, I can feel it.
Like go down just the
Yes. I'm not sure, but I know we've got quite a few special vegetation around here in protected species. Oh, you've got to look good. If you look to your right, you'll see out there, the distance on the hill, you'll see two chimneys. They don't look identical. There's one square chimney and one round trip chimney. So the story behind that is that the Cornish built round chimneys and we're going straight down the hill, and the Welsh built square chimneys. The Cornish were very superstitious people. They had all their little pixies and all their myths and so forth, and they were afraid that there were some evil spirits hiding in the corners. So they always built round, no corners. Yep. And just as we go down the bend, not too fast, because I just want to talk about the wall. So just as we get to the bend here, we've got the brand new Excavation Discovery. So this area in here to your left, that was all covered in very large trees and lots of scrubs until recently. Me and other people who are nosy and know about history, we didn't know about this particular structure right ahead of us here, the old water wheel pit, but it was very difficult to get to because of all the trees. So they decided 6 months ago to clear the whole area and make all that visible to the public. So we've now got the water wheel pit here all visible. And also when that clearing happened, other things turned up. So you'll see those little round, you see those little round walls? So they're called bottle pits. So that was where the ore, after it had been crushed through the old crusher, which we hope is under that mullet heap over there. We're waiting for the archaeologists. That the ore would be put into those little pit here and mixed. And eventually, once it had been through those 5 pits, it would be clean enough to take to the smelting paddock just across the road. So very, very exciting new discovery here. It's going to be covered in boardwalks, so you can actually walk, and it's going to be wheelchair friendly, plan friendly, and so forth. So that's going to be really nice new areas to visit. To the left. So on our left-hand side here, we've got the old mine store from 1847. So the mine store was where everything that was kept in terms of tools and handles and all the different equipment that you needed while working in the mine. So the miners were paid their salary, which could vary, as I said, depending on the quality and quantity of the ore that they found. And they would get an average, because we can see all the old reports of the salaries, we know that the average would have been around about 25 shillings, but it could be more or less depending on what they found. From that salary, they would be deducted whatever they used. If they went to the store and picked up some candles to light up their workspace, and that was the only way of lighting up, this was before oil lamps. They picked up some candles, they might have had their pickaxe sharpened down there by the blacksmith. They would all be deducted from the salary. So whatever they made, everything that was picked up would be to the right pickaxe. Would be deducted. So at the end of the day, probably wouldn't have been much more than just to pick up a bit of food from the store. That was the weekly salary. Also, from that weekly salary, they would have to pay 7 shillings to live in one of the cottages owned by the mining company, and they would have to pay 1 shilling for the doctor's fund. So this is the first example of a health fund. So you have to pay the 1 shilling, and for that 1 shilling, you would be patched up by the mine doctor if you had some sort of injury. So we have now entered the second township to the left bank, 6 Street. So this second township was set up by the government. The mining township was owned by the mining company, and the government, the Crown, couldn't build anything in there. So when they needed to build their official buildings, jail, courthouse, police station, and so forth, that was all built here. If you just swing to the right. So on the corner here we've got the beautiful old courthouse from 1857. So at this time, in the 1850s, the population had exploded in Barra. We had so many people working in the mine, and Barra had become the 2nd largest town in South Australia, the 7th largest Australia-wide. And where we've got many people assembled, there's always 1 or 2 rotten apples. People do what they're not supposed to do. So that's why we needed a courthouse, we needed a nice police station with police who could maintain law and order to the left. And we've got the jail a bit further out here. So now, we have to remember that people work very, very hard, 6 days a week, 10 hours a day. When you finish work, you might want to treat yourself to a beer. As a matter of fact, beer was healthier than water back in those days. So to the left, thank you, and there's a little bit in the road here, so watch your front end. Yeah, so people went to the pub and probably had a few of the locally brewed unicorn beers. things were not that as strong as they are today. But I think they drank a lot because they did those stuff ships all day. So people might get a bit disorderly and been a bit local too. So that could, to the right here, that could mean that you end up spending a few days in jail. It actually didn't take more than using some swear words in public. That could easily put you in a cell for a couple of days. Being drunk in the street, that was a bad one. They have changed the rules since because I think they realised that the jails will be full. Another interesting side of that is that the boys worked in the mine from when they were 7. The 7-year-olds till they were 12, they all worked above ground. When the boys were 12, they were considered to be adult men because they'd already been working 5 years in the mine. So they would go underground, work with the men to the right point. And they, of course, they could also go with the men to the pub. So the legal drinking age was 12 years. So we are now in Tourist Street. So this end of town here, the government would lay out little blocks of land which could be purchased at a reasonable price, so people could get a chance of saving up and buying their own plot of land and then build their own house instead of leasing from the mining company. So on the left-hand side, we've got a good example of Cornish architecture, Cornish cottages. They were built by James Tiver. He bought a large block of land and then he built this road, which he then rented out to fellow miners. So these have their individual heritage listing due to their old age. On the other side of the road, we've got some very, very small cottages. Remember, the miner would work 10 days in the mine, he came home, and then he had to start working on his own place. Probably a bit of pressure from the wife. You know, you can start working on my house. So of course he didn't build larger than he had to. So the cottages are very small. They also would have used whatever they could find of materials around about. They would walk around and pick up some stones and build from whatever they could find. So not the same nice architecture, nice materials that we saw in the mining town of Coringa. So we're now heading out towards the jail. So Red Roof Jail was built in 1856. The second oldest jail in South Australia. So the first one built outside Adelaide. Remember, we were the largest town outside Adelaide in the 1850s. So the jail was built to accommodate 30 prisoners, both male and female, because females were naughty as well. If you look up to your right, you'll see the beautiful front gate here. We just go really slow here, you can enjoy the gates. So it was a jail from 1856. Then it closed after the mine closed and 2/3 of the population moved out. Then this place became a girls' reformatory. In the late 1800s, the industrial schools in Adelaide were so full that they needed other places to put some of these girls, and we had 30 girls that came up from Adelaide to go into the car park here and then come out the other side for a youth. So the girls were here until 1922. So another 100-year anniversary for the closure of the girls' reformatory. This building then became a family home. The local family had 13 kids and they were looking for a place that had plenty of room, and that was the jail. So I don't know how they organised themselves. Sounds very interesting. They might have slept in the cells. In later years, the jail has been used as a film location. If anyone is familiar with the movie Breaking Moran, it's about the Boer War. It's a prize-winning film that came out in 1980. So that was, the whole movie was basically filmed around here. So quite busy out here. The property on your right hand side is one of the old Methodists. So we have quite a few churches in Borough. We have, of course, the Methodist churches because all the colonies were very, very strict Methodists. There are two different types of Methodists, the Methodist and the primitive Methodists, and they could not share the same church. So we had 4 Methodist churches, 2 ordinary Methodist churches and 2 primitive Methodist churches. So the 2 townships were considered different townships, so we had double up of everything. We had a Lutheran church as well. There was a small percentage of German miners here as well. So of course Lutheran church. We had a big Catholic church too. So quite a lot of religious buildings and all churches have their maxes from the ministers. So down the end here, we'll see one of that is actually the primitive Methodist Church at Redwood, which is also private property now. Right here on your right hand side, primitive Methodist Church at Redwood. We go to the left. So we've got a not flash Lutheran church on your right hand side. The original Lutheran church burnt down. It was actually a bit further down here. So they now have these little, I was about to say cardboard church. So we're now heading towards the Wilkes border. So where the Wilkes were the expertise in the colonies were the expertise in mining. The Wilkes were the expert for smelting down a little bit of ore. So eventually, the big smelting area in Swansea decided that they would purchase a block of land here and build some furnaces and smelt the ore right on the spot. So this is where we're heading now. On our left-hand side, if you just stop just where that lady is, I hope this is not getting you trying to pick it up. So this is the only existing building structure from the old smelt. So if you had a close look at the wall here, this is the old horse stables with walls going down the side. All the stones here are quite black, and that is because they're not stones or rocks, they're actually slag. So the byproduct from the smelting process has been reused for building the wall here. Again, a good example of reusing, which was very important back in those days, where they couldn't get supplies easily, tried to reuse everything you could. This particular area, unfortunately, is also privately owned, which means that the owner has taken out a sign. He doesn't want tourists to stop and have a look, but he's taken out a sign. That doesn't matter, because I still know. But it also means that he's not particularly interested in restoring it to its original state. Last I came past, he had cows in there, rubbing their bums up against the heritage wall, which I was not too happy about, but what can you do? His property, his rights. But yeah, eventually that wall will disintegrate right here. Eventually that will fall over if it's not restored properly. Yeah, and that's another thing with stonework. You have to make sure that you don't have vegetation and roots growing into the stone, because that will make it crumble. The actual smelts paddock is on the other side of the road. So you see over here, big area, you can even see that it still looks black and burnt even after all these years. The mill structures here, we see lots of slag still lying around, all worthless. We have right here, you might be able to spot some foundations from the old furnace houses, 3 very large furnace houses that would heat up the ovens to extreme temperatures. The green rock malachite I showed you would then be put in there and smelted, and you would then extract the pure copper from the slag, and the pure copper was then what they needed to take other places so they could produce items out of copper. So copper was very used back in the late 1800s and early 1900s. They used it for pots and pans and candle holders. The big official buildings like castles and parliaments, they all have copper roofs. So lots of copper was used back in those days. Copper is a very soft material, so eventually they found out that brass was much more durable. So brass has been, you add tin to the copper during the process and you get a much more durable material. So that meant that copper sort of went out of fashion. It is coming back though. I've noticed many household items now in the shops are made of copper, so it has had a revival. We're now back to Paxton Square cottages. If you look to your right, you'll see the miners' cottages that we saw when we came from the dugouts. So you can see it's built in this unusual setup, a U-shaped formation with a big communal area in the middle. It is supposedly the very first example of company housing, so built by the mining company to accommodate their workers. Very, very genius with the common area in the middle where, of course, the women would have helped each other with washing and cooking and looking after children and so forth. Yes, so they're holiday accommodation. So if you do want to come to Barra for a holiday, you can put one of these and stay there. So they're all little to the right. They're all self-contained. They've got a little kitchenette and beautiful bedrooms. They have been restored many times. It's not like living like a miner. It's quite luxurious actually. Stuffed with air conditioned and beautiful beds and really nice place. Very, very popular. Which means that if you do want to stay there, you have to book a good time. So that takes us back to Market Square. Go to the railway station, yes, and I need to pick up my car. So if you go up where we started out, no, pick my car. So how long are you going to be at the railway museum? Yeah? Okay, if you have time after that, so I'm going down to the museum, the mining museum, where I work until 1 o'clock. So that's just down the road from the railway station. So if you do have extra time, you're welcome to come into the museum. We've got quite a few interesting things there. We've got a big model that shows, so that's straight ahead here. Yeah. If you drop me off by the railway station, the town hall, I just go home and get my car. So a lot of artifacts and models and pictures that can explain more about the early mining. Thank you so much. And the railway station do have toilets if you need to use some neutral. Thank you very much. You have a lovely rest of the day. And don't take that sun with you. Use the big plus. Thank you. Thank you. Morning tea.
Better idea. How are you, Cheryl? The other view. Oh, I don't know. The outside, no. The new view out this way, was it? No, it's gorgeous, isn't it? Oh, yes. It's deeply rushing. Yeah, it's good when, you know, we came and had one microwave and one toilet, you know, a big toilet, but, you know, one... I've lost him. Oh, yes he is. Good. Thank you. You want to open this door as well?
Stationary thing.
Yeah. Did somebody say they're going to turn it into a restaurant?
Where was that?
In there.
Oh, God.
And like I said,
Oh, oh, good. Looks great. Very nice. I know, you know.
I thought this was out of bounds, that's why I didn't come in here.
oh, we use it.
we're going to go under this bridge, and that was the main road we come out, and so this road here leads onto the Northern Connector that heads into Adelaide. Only about 20-25 k's from Gawler, which we skirted just before we turned towards Clare. And it's also like it's this third highway, so if you just hopped on that and kept going, you'd end up going past Wagga and onto the bridge.
Is that everybody? Yeah, the coach operator, he's just cleaning out, sweeping out the bus. He'll meet us in there.
No worries. I think we've got the best day of the week so far. So we're going to enjoy some sunshine and having a look around.
Yes.
So I won't take too long. I'll just give you a little introduction about Seppeltsfield in case you haven't been before. So Seppeltsfield was established in 1851. The Seppelt family came over from Silesia in eastern Germany to avoid to flee really, the religious persecution happening over there, as did most families that started up in Barossa. So Seppeltsfield started out as a fully functioning and self-sufficient farm, which is, as we'll walk around, you'll see it's quite spread out. We've got lots of different buildings that were used for different parts of the farming back in the day. And all the family and the workers lived on the property. So some of the cottages at the back of the road, you might have driven past them, that's where all the workers lived. So part of working for the Seppelt family, they got 2 hot meals a day and they all ate together in the workers' dining hall. So that's where actually we're going to be having our lunch today. So I'll be hosting you for your lunch and taking care of you for this part of your Seppeltsfield adventure, and then you're going to get to go on a bit of a tour of the property and have a taste of some of our wines, because that's definitely what we're first and foremost promoting and doing these days. So as we head down, if anyone needs to do a bathroom stop, we've got the men's just off to the right, and then the ladies are around the corner. So you're welcome to, we'll wait for you, and then we can head on down to lunch.
Trail. Just here's all my food trail.
Here's the gents.
And now we can make the rain
The race arena. Another one, okay? Right.
You know what? And we got a family tree we don't know about. Glenn sends his love. Hello, Glenn.
It's the only time I've ever seen it on phone. I brought a group up to the concert.
Probably a good opportunity if you haven't, if you would like to go to the tour, it's probably a good chance now because our tasting is going to be downstairs in Centennial Collection. So if you feel the need, perhaps now is a good time to refresh in the ladies or gents. Good. I'll give you that opportunity and perhaps we'll just reconvene outside in the sun and I'll introduce myself and we'll go for a bit of walk and talk.
Thank you.
I'm going to host you now for the next hour. We're going to go for a little bit of a walk, a relaxed and casual walk. I'm going to show you some of the beautiful locations here on the estate and talk about the history of this beautiful estate at Seppeltsfield. Then I'm going to take you into our main blending cellar building where our cellar door is, and downstairs I've got a special private tasting set up for you. So I'll take you through about 5 wines from our list.
Nobody here drinks, do they?
Wines for you to try. There's a couple of agents down there.
Disgusting.
If he keeps talking, he'll talk us into it.
It's a lovely afternoon actually. So we've got an opportunity to have a look outside. So I'm going to start. We're going to walk around the corner here. So just watch out for these bricks. They're fairly uneven. So watch your feet until we get around to the front of the homestead, and we'll stop there and I'll talk about the homestead and the origins of this beautiful estate. So just come around.
Thank you, David.
Hey, Bill, how are you? Very good.
Now, Humphrey, you know what happened last time you were on the walk?
Oh no, he fell. Well, I just paused in front of the homestead for you, so it's a good spot because we can see the oldest buildings on the estate from this position. So I'm going to bring you back to the origins of this this beautiful and historic estate of Seppeltsfield. 1851 is when we started making wine here on this estate. And we have a very strong reputation at Seppeltsfield for fortified wines. Wines like tawny ports and sherries. We make some of the most amazing examples of those styles that you'll find anywhere in the world. And I'll tell you more about our very special tawnies that we make here as we proceed on the little walk this afternoon. But the origins of the estate were with Joseph and Joanna Seppelt. They emigrated to South Australia, by ship of course, in 1849. And they came with their young son Benno Seppelt, who was just 2 years old at the time. And they also brought with them 13 other families from their local community to join them on this journey to start life afresh in the new world here in South Australia. Now, they came from Silesia. Silesia is a region in the southern part of Poland, but it's considered to be like an East German enclave. Many of the people who settled here in the Barossa Valley had their origins, like the Seppelts, from Silesia or from Prussia, which is in the northern part of Poland and the northern part of Germany. So very strong connections, even to this day, with family names and family groupings from that part of the world. So very, very strong. They came because there was religious persecution against Lutheran minorities in a largely Catholic space, but there was also a lot of political turmoil taking place in Europe in the years preceding their emigration. In 1848, there were failed revolutions in France and Germany. There was a lot of fear and concern. People were worried that their sons, for example, might be conscripted into foreign armies or have all of their assets stripped from them from outside government. So a lot of people emigrated in 1849, and the Seppelts were part of that wave of emigration. Joseph Seppelt was a chemist, and in Silesia he had a factory where he made cigars, snuffs, but also liqueurs. His original intention was to bring that enterprise with him to South Australia and use those 13 families as a workforce to start a settlement together, but also an enterprise together. Now, tobacco is not suited to our climate here in South Australia. It's a crop that needs a bit more of a temperate climate. And our summers are too hot and dry for good quality tobacco. So Joseph Seppelt soon modified his plans and decided he would focus on beverages. So he looked for a suitable location to establish a settlement with these 13 families and an enterprise, and it evolved into this beautiful estate here at Seppeltsfield. The first land purchase from Joseph was a 120-acre parcel of land bought from a farmer in Township for £1 per acre. And then the colonial government granted some adjoining land parcels, granting them to the Seppelt family so that they would be successful, because they wanted taxpayers. They had plenty of land to give away, but they didn't have much in terms of industry and taxpayers. So that was the reason why they gave some land to consolidate this estate. So that brought it up to about 400 odd acres, and that's what this historic property is to this day. Now, we own thousands of acres of vineyard under our banner, Seppeltsfield, outside of the boundaries of this historic estate. Most of it's on this western side and adjoining this estate. But this is a sort of a standalone separate property, about 400 acres. Now, the Seppelt family built their homestead and the winery buildings on this side of Seppeltsfield Road. On the other side of the road, that's where the other families had their individual holdings. So this winery evolved quite differently to other wineries here in the Barossa. It evolved as a settlement attached to a winery, not just a winery in its own right. So this is a place where people not only worked, but they lived here. Even today, we have our own postcode here at Seppeltsfield. Now there's no shops, in the streets. There's only houses across the road, but we have sort of reinvented that whole sense of this place's community with the way this beautiful winery is now presented as a major tourism destination winery. We have, in our old stables at the top there, a range of different artisans who have their own studios up there. And it's like the old days, you know, when you had the blacksmith, the saddler, you know, all these people with different skills living close by where collectively you could survive as a community. So it has that sort of sense back on this estate with all those wonderful artisans, leather makers, you know, people making hats and knives and all sorts of things. So it's a really interesting estate, the way it's been presented in the modern sense, and still harkening back to its past. But back in the early days, well, let me point out that the oldest building on the estate, and there are 13 heritage listed buildings on this beautiful estate at Seppeltsfield, so it's a real amazing historic site there. Just at the background there, as you drove in to the estate on the left-hand side, they're the old stables. They're the oldest buildings here, and they date to the 1850s. And it just suggests to us something about their existence back then. Survival was the first priority, and the animals that they purchased after arrival here in South Australia were essential to their survival as a community together. So there were, you know, like draft horses, a wonderful Clydesdale horse team here, you know, all the cows, the chickens, the pigs, everything they needed to survive, be self-sufficient here in this sort of isolated place as it was at the time. 2 days, you know, like horse and cart from here to the city. So, you know, it's very difficult to get things. So they had to be self-sufficient. So the first priority, house the animals, and then we can start to work on the homestead for Joseph's wife, Joanna, their young family. So the house is the second sort of building built, dates back to the 1850s, and it's just this one in here. That's quite a humble little structure. And it also is quite illustrative because it says to me that these people were very humble. They were focused on their enterprise. They weren't about trying to show off how rich and powerful they were. And this building doesn't even have a street frontage. You know, that's given to the winery building in front. And it shows their priorities as well. Joseph and Joanna lived in the cottage with their young son Benno, and they had another 2 children while they were here on site. But the first wines were made on that patch of grass in front of the homestead. We call that winemaker's lawn. And nowadays it's a nice little place for small wedding ceremonies. It's very, very picturesque. But in the old days there was a dairy in front of the house on that lawn, and that's where Joseph started making wines in the dairy in 1851. But he soon got kicked out of the dairy, and he made some dedicated winemaking structures in what is now part of this building here. And 5 slate-lined open fermenters were the first sort of purpose-built winemaking facilities on this estate, and they are still in place in the first tunnel of that building, so very historic. Joseph made a wide range of beverages here. He made medicinals and tonics, his chemistry background, but he made cordials as well. We have quite a range of cordials. He made wines for local consumption because the Silesians and Prussians expected wines with their meals. But fortified wines were by far and above the most commonly reproduced product here because fortified wines were more durable. And without refrigeration in those days, and you're faced with transporting your wine in a barrel in the heat, fortifieds can cope, but table wines can't. So table wines were more locally consumed, whereas the fortifieds could be more widely distributed.
Excuse me, David, did he bring some of the vines with him?
No, they didn't, because that wasn't their original intent, but others did. And once vines are here, they can be reproduced by cuttings.
Right, because I was just wondering.
That's right. Yeah, but quite a lot of these settlers that came across, you know, from Europe on the ships, they'd stop in places like South Africa, you know, where you know, like they could supply themselves with, you know, cuttings. But once established here, then they could be just propagated once they're here. Now, Joseph Seppelt unfortunately died fairly young in life. He died at the age of 55 after getting this whole settlement established, this wonderful winery established. He died from pneumonia. His wife, Joanna Seppelt, she was a little bit older than Joseph, about 6 years older, and she was a woman of Spanish heritage. She died also from pneumonia 2 years after Joseph. And that left this whole enterprise and settlement in the hands of the eldest son, Benno Seppelt. He was 21 years of age when Joseph died in 1868. So there were big responsibilities on that young man's shoulders. But Benno Seppelt was a giant, and he was a very successful man. A great entrepreneur, a very respected community person. He did a lot of amazing and wonderful things. He's the man responsible, basically, for most of what you see on the estate even today. Most of these beautiful buildings were built during Benno's time. Benno fathered 13 children with his wife Sophie Schroeder, so he was pretty successful in that regard as well. He did some extraordinary things, and I'm going to tell you more about the amazing thing that Benno Seppelt did in 1878 when we get down to the bottom of this building. But from this vantage point, I want to point out this building in front of us is our first commercial scale winery built on the estate. Joseph Seppelt had started the building works, but he died just fairly early on in the construction. And it took his son Benno 10 years after his father's death to complete this wonderful building. It's actually built on 3 levels, and we can only see the top level from this vantage point. So we're going to walk around a little bit where you can get a better perspective of this wonderful building. All right, let's go for a little wander. I've paused here so I can tell you about this interesting building here. This is our old Vinegar Factory. So this was built by Benno Seppelt to obviously produce a very important food product and food preservation product, vinegar for pickling and everything else. And it was put in place basically to take advantage of failed ferments. If a ferment failed, you know, rather than pour all of that wine down the creek, you could turn it into a useful product. You could turn it into vinegar by undergoing a bacteriological ferment. So there were big vinegar vats in that space, and we made our own vinegar here. Famous sort of vinegar with a vine leaf on the front of the bottle, right up to the 1970s. We don't do it anymore. No. So that building had been vacant basically since the 1970s, but it's been repurposed. We've now got Glass Virgin in there, and they're a group who make skincare products from olive oil and other natural ingredients. So it's a really good group to have on the site, and it's wonderful to have that building back in use, actually making things on site. So the bottom level, they actually make all the soaps and creams and things. They source the oil locally. And upstairs is just a beautiful shop where you can sample and try all those products. So if you do get a couple of minutes at the end, you know, like...
what time does it close?
They close at 5.
So who makes the
It got sold. Vine Vale, Vinegar eventually, I don't know.
Was it still under your name?
No. They still... They used to produce a vinegar with a great fine leaf on it, with under a different name, Vine Vale vinegar, but then I think they jumped on
Can you actually see them making?
You can view down and you can see them cutting bars of soaps and things like that. That's what they're doing in there now. So yeah, you can see that. Now, obviously you've been in the dining hall, which Benno Seppelt built specifically for workers, so that workers could be fed 2 hot meals a day, breakfast and lunch. I can point out also there's another interesting heritage building at the back there. That tall timber structure, 2-storey structure, is an old smokehouse. So in the old days, you know, like we would smoke meats, you know, had our own piggery here, an abattoir, and you know, joints of pork would be salted and then, you know, like taken up, you know, pulled up to the top of the smokehouse, the fire would be lit, and, you know, they would be smoked. And hooks in the cellars would hold, you know, like the joints of meat or the sausages or neck wrists that were made as well. So, you know, like food production was a pretty important part of this estate. High numbers of people that had to be catered for here. You had to produce a lot of food. So, you know, vinegar to be able to pickle things, salting things and drying them. They had orchards and all sorts of things. In the early years here, this operated more as a mixed farm, And it was really only in Benno's time that this property was converted to a vineyard estate. It only has some patches of vines, but it was really focused on food production. But nowadays it's basically a vineyard estate. But our chef Owen Andrews, who looked after you for lunch, well, he makes prosciuttos again. They cleared out the old smokehouse, full of filing cabinets from the 1920s, but he and Rebecca cleaned it all out, fired up the smoker, and it works a treat. So we're actually producing prosciuttos again. They're hanging in the cellars just like the old days. Wonderful to have that. Now, we're going to walk down the ramp here where I can show you the true perspective of this building. They're settled,
Yes.
not at the helm. This was a family business up until about 1985. By the time we'd reached 1985, the Seppelt family was so large. I mean, Benno Seppelt had 13 children,
right.
and you can imagine as that tree grows and how it branches out, just how many people had their, interest in this estate. And many of them wanted to draw their share, to start their own business. And that drew down cash reserves. And then you get other investors to replace that cash. And eventually, if you get over 51% where the other investors, then you lose control of your business. And that's what happened to the Seppelt family in the 1980s. So this then went to corporate owners for 20 years, different corporate ownership. In 2007, a group of investors bought this estate back from the corporate owner at the time, who were Treasury Estates. So this became a private winery again in 2007. Not with the Seppelt family, but with a group of investors led by Janet Holmes Accord. Then our current owner, a man by the name of Warren Randall, bought into that group in 2009 and eventually bought the other investors out. So luckily we are privately owned by a South Australian entrepreneur, and he loves this place.
That makes a big difference.
He was a winemaker at Seppelt Great Western, which is one of our estates in Victoria. And when he got his fortune, he had the opportunity, he bought this beautiful estate. So Warren's a very important player in the Australian wine industry. He's Australia's biggest single vineyard owner, and he's got a great confidence in the future of this industry. And he's invested millions of dollars on this estate. So we're in very good hands. Very happy to have an entrepreneur in the spirit of Benno Seppelt in charge again.
Did it survive well during the pandemic?
Yes. Business-wise, yes. Yes. No, we're strong. Visitation's low, but spend is high.
Yeah.
And people are getting a good experience, rather than just,
David, do you mind if we get a group photo in front of this magnificent building here?
Absolutely. Stand in front of the truck as a group.
Yeah, that's what we thought. Is that all right?
Because that tells a story too.
Yeah.
They're moving some wine today.
We're going to get a group photo in front of the truck in the building.
Okay.
So should we use your phone? Because it's probably a bit better than mine. And I think...
This is the building that Benno Seppelt took 10 years to complete after Joseph's death. You can see it's built in a couple of stages. Like on the right-hand side, if you have a look at the stone, you can see it's a bit lighter than on the left-hand side.
Oh, yes.
So the first building was built as a standalone, and it had a long tunnel, just like this one, cut into the side of this hill here. And it's a very clever building. The bottom level, that's where the 5 slate-lined open fermenters are. They still have air. And the idea was that you're trying to find a nice sheltered position where you can control the temperature without refrigeration. They didn't have refrigeration, right? So they had to make a nice cool environment. So this created like a cave-like environment down the bottom where the wines could be fermenting over that period of like 8 days in controlled sort of temperatures, like where it didn't get too hot. And that's what you needed for a successful ferment. It didn't always work out, and that's why the Vinegar Factory, took after the spoiled ferments. But it's very cool and stable down in the bottom level of this building. But as you get higher in the building, it gets warmer as the warm air rises, and near the roof space it's very hot in summer especially. So everything in the upper levels was dedicated to the maturation of fortified wines. Because they have high alcohol, they're stable in the heat. So you can keep tawny ports in barrel in those upper levels, and that's perfect for them. The table wines, you know, you need to be in that nice cooler environment. So a very clever building in the way it was built. There's a little bit of a hill here, so it was sheltered from the sort of northern sun, and a nice cool environment dug into the hill. Now, Benno Seppelt finished this building in 1878, so it was a big breakthrough in their productive capacity here when the second tunnel was built and everything was completed. To celebrate what he had achieved in 1878 and to acknowledge what his parents had brought to this place, Benno wanted to do something special in 1878. So he put aside a barrel of his best tawny port from that vintage, and he declared that nothing would be bottled from that barrel for 100 years. It's a tradition that's been followed here at Seppeltsfield in every single vintage here since 1878. Now, as a result of Benno's vision and of the commitment of those who followed Benno, we have here at Seppeltsfield this extraordinary collection of tawny ports called the Centennial Collection. It's a barrel of our best tawny port from every individual vintage from 1878 to 2022. We've never missed a year in that production. It's an important collection of wine. It's the oldest unbroken collection of any commercially available wine in the world. And the way you can get older wines than 1878, you can't get a continual lineage of the wine from the present day going back as far as we can with this collection. In 1978, we could fulfill the vision of Benno Seppelt. When that first barrel, the 1878, reached its 100th year, that was the first time we could make a 100-year-old single vintage tawny port in 1978. And when they came to do the bottling, the barrel initially had 500 litres of wine in it. But in 1978, there was only 120 litres of it left. It wasn't because they were drinking. It was because of the evaporative loss through the wood. So the remaining volume is very dark, very thick, very intense, and incredibly good tawny port. So a limited bottling is done from the remaining volume, but always a museum volume is retained so that it can go back to barrel and continue to age beyond the 100 years. We've repeated this process every year since 1978, and this year our current 100-year release is the 1922. Next year, on the 20th of February, we'll release the 1923 as our new 100-year. The 20th of February, because that was the day that the Seppelt family came to settle here in the state.
Has the evaporation rate been the same in subsequent
years? The evaporation rate is extreme, but it's deliberate.
Okay.
It's deliberate because Benno Seppelt knew he wanted a distinctive product. And if you tasted this tawny, you knew it would have to come from this production. So there's no accident about losing 2/3 to 3/4 of your volume. It's only, it is necessary to achieve the wine style that he wanted. That's what makes it so special. It's so concentrated.
You mentioned tasting. So do you have in-house tasters?
Yes.
You do?
Yes.
Okay.
And you can actually taste the 100-year-old. We offer that at $90 a taste. And it's about 10 mil. But I can tell you that a 100 ml bottle, which is, we sell those, that's $1,500.
Oh, pretty close.
So, you know, a 10 ml taste for $100 is good.
No, I think that's a little bit behind my budget.
No, they were widely distributed throughout Australia. Some was exported internationally as well. Yeah, they were pretty
Real
hefty drinkers
connoisseurs,
back then, and
say that.
yeah,
Back in the 1800s.
fortifieds were very popular styles. You know, in England they love tawny ports and sherries.
What about the vats? Do you reuse them? The vats or the casks, you reuse them, or
We do. We reuse the emptied casks in production as well.
and the flavour
Seeps into the new wine. Exactly. Gives it a head start. That's correct.
I thought you said that you put some back into the barrels that they came out of.
Sorry?
I thought you said you put some back into the barrels.
Yeah, but a different barrel. They put it into a museum barrel. It's a bit smaller rather than returning it back to the sun. Folks, we're going to walk in now. I'm going to show you, just before I do, I'll just point out, just for context, Greenock Creek runs through the centre of this property. Right? And that was an important feature for why the settlers wanted to settle here, is because it had fresh water. You know, you're wanting to start a settlement and an enterprise, you need water. And that was essential. But when Benno finished this building in 1878, he just didn't pack away the tools and, you know, pat himself on the back. He kept expanding this business. And on the other side of the creek, he built a new distillery for brandy spirit production. And he built a new winery, a famous winery called the Gravity Flow Cellar. And that's on the other side of the creek, on the other hill, cut into the side of the hill. And as you drive past it, you can see how that building works. The grapes are delivered to the top of the hill where the crusher is. And then there's an ingenious network of pipes, channels that can direct the juice to any one of 120 open fermentation tanks that are under the terraced roof. So it was a wonderfully innovative, energy-saving product that it was production, but it also had an influence on the style of wine because it meant you could have softer wines through gravity transfer rather than just pumping a line. So that became quite characteristic of our wines, is that you have these nice soft wines that you can enjoy as young wines, and you didn't have to put them in a bottle for 10 years before you get them. So that's what we've got on the other side of the creek. But I'm going to show you now inside this tunnel. We're going to head onto our tasting. So just walk around the truck. It stays the same in bottle. It's not going to deteriorate. No. Enjoy it.
You call those vats or casks?
Those are barrels. Yep. And they're holding some of our best reds for cellar door. So this space, behind the stone walls, were concrete tanks. And in the old days, we would blend the wines, you know, and store the wines in those concrete tanks. We don't make wine in this building anymore. The function of this building, with the 5 slate-lined open fermenters and these blending tanks in here, it's all been taken over by the gravity feed. So this is not used for wine making anymore, it's for wine storage and maturation. Now, this bottom level, where it's nice and cool, it's ideal temperature for storing red wines in barrel. Because it doesn't get any hotter than this in the heat of summer here. It's just the same. It's really well insulated down here. So the boys are just doing, you know, that's why the truck's outside with the tanks. And they're bringing in barrels here and they're transferring the red wine into those barrels so they can start their maturation process. So these wines have just finished their malolactic fermentation in stainless steel tank and they're ready to go into barrel for either 6 months or a year and a half, depending upon the wine we're making. And these barrels are being stored down here in a nice cool environment. But everything is above you is not table wine, it's fortified wine. Because it gets hotter. And so you need, you know, like the high alcohol fortifieds to be stored in those hotter conditions. You don't want your table wines in those conditions. So if you have a look at those big casks up the top there's over 2,000 litres in each of those barrels. And there are names and dates on the barrels. Well, they are the 13 children of Benno Seppel. Benno and Sophie. So they've got their years of birth and death, just as a tribute on the barrels.
David, have you got your own coopers here on site?
Yes, well that low building across the road is our cooperage. And the guys are not there today because they've gone off to Fiji to make barrels there for Coca-Cola, who are doing a lot of sort of whiskey and rum production. And so our cooperage team know how to make these barrels, and they've gone off to Fiji after that. Yes.
Good, great.
Yes.
Coca-Cola in no barrels.
Yeah, well, Coca-Cola are behind this spirit venture.
Right.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't think putting Coke in Make is going to make it taste any but yes, we do. We're one of only 2 wineries here in South Australia that have cooperage on site. There's us and Yalumba. Yalumba are a nice old.
And do they sell to other wineries?
Yes, we sell.
It's a big business.
Yeah. And so our coopers maintain our barrel collections here, but also they'll make barrels for people who want to have their tawny poured at home.
Yeah.
Like 10, 20 litre casks, so we have those for sale here. And they also make barrels for the whiskey industry throughout Australia and South Pacific.
So that's a nice little side.
Yeah, it is a bit of a side thing. And the tawny port barrels and sherry barrels are very sought after by whiskey producers because they impart particular flavours in the whiskey. Folks, we're just going to duck around the corner where I've got your tasting set up. So, wines we're going to taste. So help yourselves to one of these glasses. If you could just hang on to that glass for the tasting, I will be able to recharge it. This first wine that I'm pouring is a dry white wine, and the variety is Vermentino, which is it has its origins from Italy, Sardinia. But we're very happy with this variety growing here in Boston. It's very refreshing. Vermentino. This one. So this one retails at $30 a bottle. It's a really refreshing dry white wine. Vermentino.
You got that on top.
Vermentino is the lemon wine. Folks, just while we're enjoying those wines, I'm going to tell you a little bit about the palm trees that this place is really famous for. So Centennial Collection, and I'm sure you're driving past them
On the way out.
On the way out, you're going to drive past this amazing lineup of date palms and Cocos Island palms, and it's called the Avenue of Hope and Dreams. And the story dates back to the 1920s, where after World War I, there was a really slow economic recovery in this country. Times were really tough in the 1920s. Benno II had to call together a meeting of people who worked and lived on the estate, and he told them, well, look, you know, we've got to close down production. We're not selling these wines. We've got to, you know, like redo the way we do things here. I can't afford to pay you anymore. I can house you, I can feed you, and I've got work for you, but you know, we're going to have to stick through this together if we're going to keep families together. So the people agreed, and it kept the community going. And during that time, Beto got the workers to, rather than being engaged in production, because that was slow, he got them expanding the cellar program. So many of the big galvanised iron maturation cellars that we drive past as you were built during that period. But then I also had a plantation of date palms that he asked the workers to raise, because I believe he thought that that might be a useful crop. And he got them to plant out the date palms along Seppeltsfield Road and join in this estate to other holdings that we had at Dorian and also at Chateau Tanunda, at the stage behind Chateau Tanunda. So that was that was known as our east cellar. So they planted these lines of date palms to indicate that this is the Seppeltsfield estates, and he called it the Avenue of Hope and Dreams. And I can tell you that it is a gorgeous road. It is very beautiful. The date palms don't produce effective fruits, unfortunately. It gets too cold here at certain times of the year for those fruits to develop, and you end up with very paper-thin sort of skin. So they don't produce viable dates, but the trees grow very, very well. So they're splendid specimens now. They're 90 years of age. And the squat ones are the date palms, and the tall, thin ones are the Probus palms. Species that are planted, but it's a very famous vista, and you're going to enjoy it as you exit. Yeah, that's only a small subset of the trophies that we've won. There's a lot more.
Did you have any young men from Ireland working here?
Quite possibly, yeah. Most of them are German names. I mean, you see that, you know, look, so many people have gone to this place.
I think they're run.
There was quite a Baltic connection as well as a Russian connection here.
Yeah.
So folks, I've got another wine for you to try, for those of you who want to try something else. This is a Barossa Shiraz. So this is a bit fuller in body than the Grenache, darker in its colour, and the fruit profile is more on those darker fruits like blackberry and black cherry. A nice, soft, smooth, rich Barossa Shiraz. $30 a bottle as well, just like the others we've got here.
Thank you. You can drink that?
Thank
So you're saying
Yes, yes. It's scary. Then you have a look at this one. This is when they were early on when they were building it. And there's, I hope you enjoyed your visit. And, thank you. And I hope we'll see you again here. We'll explore this beautiful estate a bit further. Okay, so happy travels, everyone.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
So this one's the one you was shot.
And he brought these families over and they were on hard times and not making any money.
Oh, the sepals. Oh, the sepals.
Yeah.